Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome from the European Medicines Agency at the EMA building in Amsterdam to this virtual press briefing. Today, our Human Medicines Committee, the CHMP, recommended a conditional marketing authorization for the first COVID-19 vaccine for the EU market. This is a significant milestone in the fight against the pandemic, and we are here today to give you some background about the assessment of this vaccine, how the vaccine works, and how we will monitor the safety of the vaccine in the coming months and years. My name is Marie-Agnes Heine, and I'm the head of EMA's Communication Department. I'm delighted to have with me Emer Cook, EMA's Executive Director. Emer took office about a month ago and will talk about the tremendous effort by EMA and national authorities in member states to accelerate the assessment of this vaccine and the agency's commitment to ensure a robust assessment of all vaccines and therapeutics that are submitted to EMA. We also have with us Dr. Harald Ensmann, the chair of EMA's Human Medicines Committee, CHMP, who led the evaluation and can provide you with details of the assessment of this specific vaccine and the data that allowed the committee to recommend the vaccine for a marketing authorization. And we also have Dr. Sabine Strauss, the chair of EMA's Safety Committee, or PRAC, who will tell you more about the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine and about the measures that are being taken to ensure a continuous monitoring of the vaccine and possible side effects as long as it is used in Europe. I'm also very pleased to introduce Dr. Marco Cavalieri. He is the chair of EMA's COVID-19 Pandemic Task Force and can provide you with further technical detail if needed. Before we start, I want to explain how we plan to run this press briefing. Please note that your microphone is disabled by default for the duration of the press briefing. We will first hear short remarks by Mrs. Cook, Dr. Ensmann, and Dr. Strauss, and after that, we have 30 minutes for questions. Once the question and answer session starts, please raise your hand by WebEx if you want to ask a question. To raise your hand, you will find an icon next to your name in the list of participants. When I will give you the floor, you will see a prompt on your screen to unmute yourself. We would appreciate if you could turn on your camera when you are asking a question. Today's briefing is being broadcast via YouTube and Europe by satellite. The footage can be used free of charge by all media. You will find the respective links in the invite sent to you. As we just have 45 minutes for today's briefing, without further ado, I will now hand over to Emer Cook. Emer, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Marie-Agnes. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here and to announce that EMA's Scientific Committee met today and recommended a conditional marketing authorization in the EU for the vaccine developed by BioNTech and Pfizer. The recommendation is to prevent COVID-19 in people from 16 years of age. Our scientific opinion paves the way for a first marketing authorization of a COVID-19 vaccine in the EU with the corresponding safeguards, controls, and obligations. It will be valid in all 27 member states at the same time, and it provides them with a firm scientific foundation for the rollout of their vaccination programs and a continuing framework for control and supervision of the vaccines. It is a significant step forward in our fight against this pandemic, which is causing suffering and hardship for so many people, not just in Europe, but all over the world. This is really a historic scientific achievement. Within less than a year, a vaccine will have been developed and authorized against a new disease. This is the result of unparalleled mobilization and sharing of information between scientists, industry, regulators, healthcare professionals, patient representatives, and public health bodies across the globe. The combined global manpower has enabled the development timeframe to be compressed, while at the same time enabling robust scientific studies to be done. As medicines regulators, we have forged strong bonds with our sister agencies in other regions of the world, and under the umbrella of the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, we have led the global efforts to streamline regulatory requirements for vaccine development so as to facilitate their development and approval. Today, I would like to celebrate and acknowledge the tremendous and tireless work behind the scenes of a very high number of experts from all EU member states and my colleagues in the EMA who have been involved in the review of this vaccine. I have said several times that we have been working around the clock. I receive emails at all hours of the day and night, and some of our meetings have been held at weekends. Since the onset of this pandemic, EMA and the network of competent authorities in the EU member states have set up an agile infrastructure with a pandemic task force, the COVID ETF, bringing together all the best expertise to facilitate fast decision making by our scientific committees, and in particular, the Human Medicines Committee, which has now recommended the vaccine, and also the Safety Committee, the Pharmacovigilance and Risk Assessment Committee. Our experts engaged early in a dialogue with developers, and in October, EMA started to evaluate data on the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in what we call a rolling review, a practice whereby data is reviewed on an iterative basis as it becomes available while development is still ongoing. The companies then submitted a formal marketing authorization application on the 1st of December. Our experts have worked tirelessly to reach a robust science-based consensus from the start of the rolling review until the final CHMP today has been achieved in just 11 weeks, when we would usually expect to spend a year or more. But this time frame has been facilitated by the size of the trial and the strength of the evidence, but also by the responsiveness of everyone involved: scientists, experts, project managers, and of course the company itself. But let me say this very clearly: while we have taken every step to expedite our evaluation processes, ensuring vaccine safety has been our #1 priority. These vaccines will be given to millions of people in the EU, and we are keenly aware of the huge responsibility we have to get these recommendations right for European citizens. In the last few months, EMA has seen the intense debates taking place in the public arena, while some calling for a speedier approval, while others were concerned that development was going too fast to ensure safety. We at EMA have kept our steer, and we've been guided by the strength of the scientific evidence and nothing else. Our conclusion, which relies on the data from clinical trials in over 40,000 participants and takes into account additional data even received this weekend, is that the vaccine meets the rigorous EU standards for safety, efficacy, and quality, and is manufactured to high pharmaceutical standards. The evidence convincingly shows that the benefits are greater than the risks of the vaccine, and the CHMP chair, Dr. Ensman, will explain our evaluation in more detail. But our work does not stop here. We will continue to collect and analyze data to ensure that use of the vaccine is always based on the most up-to-date evidence. The conditional marketing authorization provides for an agreed plan with specific and legally binding obligations to ensure that additional data continues to be generated and submitted to EMA after approval. It also guarantees that the safety of a medicine is rigorously monitored across the EU through the pharmacovigilance system. The chair of our safety committee, Dr. Sabine Strauss, will explain the steps taken to ensure safety of these vaccines, including the steps for reinforced continuous close monitoring of the safety that is being put in place for all COVID-19 vaccines. We recognize that vaccines will only help in the fight against COVID-19 if citizens have enough confidence in our authorization to get vaccinated. We owe citizens transparency so they can make up their minds about the vaccine based on facts. We will publish extensive information on our website on the details of our assessments, and we will also make public all the clinical data that we have assessed in the application, which will allow for further independent scrutiny within the scientific community. I'm sure you're aware that we organised a public meeting on 11th of December to explain to the public how we are evaluating and monitoring COVID-19 vaccines, and to hear directly from European citizens about their needs and concerns. The opinion that we give today is a first step. We will need more vaccines to cover the needs, not only of Europeans, but for all global citizens who are suffering as a result of this pandemic. We will continue to play our part in fulfilling these needs. We have been interacting with other developers of other COVID-19 vaccines, but also with developers of possible treatments that are still under development. Some of these are likely to come to EMA at the start of next year. As pleased as I am to announce this recommendation today, we are not yet at a turning point in this pandemic. It will take time to roll out vaccines in sufficiently large numbers to enable all our citizens to be protected and the occurrence of the infection to be suppressed to the greatest extent possible. We know a lot more about this disease now than we knew 10 months ago, even more than we knew 3 months ago, but there is still new information coming in, and this needs to be fully assessed. Such as the recent reports on the new variant, and these are issues that need to be fully scientifically assessed. At the moment, we can say that there is no evidence to suggest that the vaccine will not work against the new variant of the coronavirus. In the meantime, we must all do our bit to prevent the spread of the disease. Follow the advice of your health authorities. Wear masks, wash your hands, and maintain distance. Vaccines alone will not be the silver bullet that will allow us to return to normal life. But the authorization of this first vaccine is definitely a major step in the right direction and an indication that 2021 can be brighter than 2020. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Emer. I will now give the floor to Dr. Harald Enzmann, the chair of the CHMP. Harald, please.
Yeah, thank you, Marie-Agnes, and good afternoon, everyone. The evaluation of this first COVID-19 vaccine in the European Union ended today with a positive opinion adopted by CHMP, the Committee for Medicinal Products in Human Use. I have the honor and the pleasure to chair. This positive CHMP opinion is the result of a collective effort across the whole European Union. In both committees, at CHMP and at EMA Safety Committee, the Prague, all the European Union member states and Norway and Iceland for the European Economic Area come together and work together. And for this special procedure here, these two committees had valuable support. We worked side by side with EMA's COVID-19 task force, a group of experts selected by the agency exactly for this task. Now, our experts of all committees of the task force have assessed the classical triad: efficacy, safety, and pharmaceutical quality. And this means the benefit-risk balance does not consider only safety and efficacy, but also the pharmaceutical quality of the vaccine. Considers how it is manufactured and controlled according to our high pharmaceutical standards. The committee has been fully aware how crucial it is that this product can be produced on a large scale in a reasonable time and in accordance with our pharmaceutical standards. The crucial data on efficacy and safety are from the main clinical trial, a large randomized study that enrolled over 43,000 people. And you know already the results. 95 fewer cases of people developing symptomatic COVID-19 among those who received the vaccine compared with those who received placebo. In both groups, the vaccine and the placebo group, there were about 18,000 people, and there were 8 cases in the vaccine group and 162 cases in the placebo group. With 8 to 162, I think a rather clear result. Based on this, and after very carefully reviewing all the data available and after getting additional clarification from the companies on several aspects that turned up, there was consensus among the members of CHMP that the indication applied for by Pfizer and BioNTech is acceptable, that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks in people aged 16 years or older. How did we get there? As with any innovative medicine, CHMP selected 2 committee members with their assessment teams from the network of the European Union national competent authorities. Those are the rapporteur and the co-rapporteur. This selection process of rapporteur and co-rapporteur allows CHMP to deploy the best available expertise in the whole of the European Union for this procedure. The rapporteur from Sweden and the co-rapporteur from France, with their teams, provided then 2 parallel and independent assessments. And these 2 parallel and independent reports were the starting points for the committee's work. CHMP members, in the end, based their conclusions on the benefit-risk balance of the vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech, on these 2 detailed and comprehensive assessments of the data. And allow me here now to thank the rapporteurs and their 2 teams of experts who have assessed this vaccine. They have reviewed an enormous amount of data related to safety, efficacy, and quality. To give you just some illustration about the amount of data, in the old days, when marketing authorization applications were made on paper, this would have been a truckload, literally. Something like 5-6 euro pallets. Fully assessing this in this time frame required outstanding teamwork of clinical assessors, non-clinical experts, assessors of pharmaceutical quality, statisticians, methodologists, and last not least, the guidance and support by the project management at the 2 national competent authorities in Sweden and France, and at EMA in Amsterdam. Allow me very shortly to highlight a few details regarding the target population, the indication of this vaccine. Unlike many other vaccines, for COVID-19, the protection of persons with higher age or comorbidities is of particular interest. It is those who carry a major share of the burden of disease who are most at risk, who suffer most. Normally, when a medicine is developed, we are used to getting less data for older age groups. In the case of this vaccine here, these populations were indeed studied. We had over 1,600 persons over the age of 75 in the study, over 800 each in the vaccine and in the placebo group. And therefore, we were able to determine that the benefits significantly outweigh the risks also in this elderly population. In the trial, 95% efficacy rate was seen in the elderly and in the people with higher risk of severe COVID-19 as in the overall population. And I think it is quite important, and that's why I took the time for that, to realize we have these convincing data for this group with the highest need of a vaccination. On the other hand, of course, the current indication includes a lower age limit of 16 years. For children under 16, we have agreed a pediatric investigation plan with the company to close this gap. Pregnant women is another population of particular interest. There is no evidence for unacceptable risks, not from non-clinical studies and not from the very, very limited clinical experience. Nevertheless, we have data only on very few single-digit numbers of pregnant women in each group, both in the vaccine and in the placebo group. That means there were simply not enough pregnant women in the trial population to draw firm conclusions. Therefore, we recommend for pregnant women a case-by-case decision based on the individual situation, considering the risk of exposure, the risk of infection, and the individual risk factors for severe disease. Finally, we, the committees, all who worked on this, know very well that the speed with which these vaccines were developed and authorized is a cause of concern for many Europeans. I would like to reassure you that the data we have analyzed and our assessment of the data have met the standards for robustness and quality that we have set out. In fact, the main trial for this vaccine is one of the largest trials we have ever evaluated for a vaccine. Nevertheless, even being the very large trial, it still is a conditional marketing authorization. Why? Because there are things left to do. There are still areas where we will need further information, and the conditional marketing authorization enables us to impose follow-up obligations and require the company to submit this data. For example, we don't know yet whether this vaccine not only prevents the disease, but also the infection with the virus. That means we don't know whether it happens that vaccinated persons may have no symptoms, may not be ill, but may still carry the virus for some time, and therefore be infectious, may infect others. The clinical trial, the big clinical trial continues, so we will get more data and more information on this issue further down the road. But until we know, the recommendation Emma Cook already mentioned remains. Even after successful completion of the vaccination, please wear masks, wash your hands, and maintain your distance whenever you can. And we need, of course, more knowledge about the pregnant women. As we have data on so few pregnant women at the moment, both in the vaccine and the placebo group, we have now put in place measures that will allow us to fill this knowledge gap. We will have a proactive surveillance system so that we can capture every bit of information on the use of this vaccine in pregnancy, so that we can refine our recommendation as soon as possible, if necessary. But with that, I'm already trespassing in the responsibility and in the particular expertise of the PRAC. As this, what I just mentioned, is just one of the many safety measures we have taken to ensure that this vaccine is tightly monitored as it's rolled out to millions of citizens in the European Union. You will want to know more about these safety measures, and Sabine Strauss, the chair of the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, the PRAC, will explain this much better than I ever could. With that, thank you, and I'm happy to leave the floor to our moderator.
Many thanks, Harald. And I now give immediately the floor to Dr. Sabine Strauss, who is the chair of our safety committee, PRAC. Sabine, please.
Thank you, Marie-Agnes. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Harald, for the very kind words. As already highlighted, the EMA's Safety Committee, the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, the PRAC in short, which I chair, worked very closely with the CHMP throughout the evaluation of this BioNTech Pfizer vaccine. The PRAC consists of experts from all 27 member states, as well as experts and representatives of European patient and healthcare professionals appointed by the European Commission. The PRAC is very aware of its responsibility to EU citizens to collect and analyze every piece of information on the safety of the vaccine, to be able to provide continuous reassurance that the benefits outweigh the risks. All medicines, including vaccines, have side effects, and a robust pharmacovigilance system is in place in the European Union to collect and promptly evaluate any side effects that may arise during vaccination campaigns from the EU and across the world. The PRAC's focus during this evaluation process is the risk management plan. The risk management plan describes the safety profile of the vaccine and identified measures that need to be put in place to ensure the best possible benefit-risk profile for this vaccine. The full risk management plan for this vaccine will be published on EMA's website. What do we know at the moment about the safety of this vaccine? Well, the clinical trials, which have been very, very large, as was highlighted, have given us a large set of safety data. More than 80,000 people received already the vaccine. And out of these, almost 10,000 were followed for more than 2 months after they received the second dose. The side effects identified in the clinical trials are very similar to those seen with other vaccines. The most common side effects in clinical trial participants for this vaccine were pain at the injection site, tiredness, headache, muscle and joint pain, chills, and fever. In the clinical trial, the side effects were usually mild and lasted for a day or so. So, the safety profile, based on the data from these large clinical trials, is reassuring. Nevertheless, it's important to have careful surveillance in place now that the vaccine will be used by very large numbers of people. Safety is key. It's important that we remain vigilant, and if new or changing side effects occur, that we detect them immediately and take action. During the assessment of the vaccine, we received a small amount of reports regarding allergic reactions from countries that had started their vaccination campaigns. We reviewed these cases in detail, and as a result are now able to provide better information to patients and to their healthcare providers on this side effect. The product information now recommends that people should be kept under close observation for at least 15 minutes following vaccination. Today's opinion recommending a marketing authorization requires that EMA and Pfizer-BioNTech continue to collect and analyze data to ensure that the use of the vaccine is always based on the most up-to-date evidence and that the safety of the vaccine is actively monitored. The core safety requirements for COVID-19 vaccines are the same strict and rigorous requirements that apply to all medicines and vaccines authorized in the EU. Vaccines are only authorized if their overall benefits outweigh their risks, and this is of particular importance since COVID-19 vaccines will be used by millions of healthy people. In addition to the usual tools, additional resources have been mobilized to monitor and assess new safety information as soon as it becomes available. The standard information resources include the information from clinical trials, from other studies, information from other regulators, and very importantly, reports of suspected side effects from people who received the vaccine and their healthcare providers. For all COVID-19 vaccines, strengthened reporting obligations for companies have been put in place. They will have to submit monthly safety reports in addition to the regular updates, as required in the pharmacovigilance legislation. To give you a comparison, these regular updates are normally requested every 6 months. Although a large number of people have received the vaccine in clinical trials and will continue to be followed up as part of these trials, no study can be ever large enough or go on for long enough time to identify all the very rare side effects. They are just too uncommon. So to ensure that we identify new or changing side effects, the EU has an excellent safety surveillance system with state-of-the-art analysis and detection. I want to take this opportunity to encourage people who have been vaccinated and their healthcare professionals to report any side effect they expect, which will then be collected and analyzed through the European system. Finally, I also would like to inform you that in addition to the studies that the manufacturer will have to perform, the EMA has also commissioned independent scientific studies from academic centers to monitor the safety of COVID-19 vaccines after their authorization in the real-life setting. And these studies will be performed in collaboration with other regulators worldwide. And with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hand back to our moderator.
Many thanks, Sabine, and many thanks, Emer and Harald, for your interventions. So we are now opening up the floor for questions. Please, as I said before, click on the raise hand icon, which appears when you hover your mouse over your name in the participant list in WebEx. When I ask you to speak, you will see a prompt on your screen to unmute yourself. Please state your name and affiliation. So the first question is from Gillian Deutsch from Politico. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my question. I have two questions, if you'll allow me. The first is about, the EMA's recommendation is following the UK, the US, which I think weeks before the EMA. And I'm curious if the scientists could really elaborate on whether that extra time was beneficial and if there was anything that you learned in order to possibly speed up the process for approving future vaccines. My second question then is that Emer Cooks mentioned the pressure speeding up and said that the EMA has really steered clear of that pressure. But the EMA was able to move up the date to today rather than last week after public calls from health ministers from Germany and Italy. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on that.
Many thanks, Gillian. I will give the floor first to Emer and then to Harald to complement. Emer, please.
So first of all, let me just explain a little bit that the conditionally marketing authorization is actually a full authorization. All of the emergency use authorizations or temporary use authorizations are actually for the use of an unlicensed vaccine. So this does create additional obligations and requirements for us. So with respect to the timelines, I think it's very important to make it clear that when we first put out the timeline, and we normally wouldn't do that. We put out a timeline of the 29th of December and we set out the latest. And all during the process, we've been constantly evaluating our systems, our processes to see how we could expedite the evaluation. And we actually decided together that we would be able to do a few more things in parallel, that in fact the information was more convincing than we had originally anticipated. And this allowed us to move forward with the evaluation at today as opposed to next week. So we were delighted to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I think that were already the major important points that were to be made. Let me go first with the matter of timelines and planning. It has been a very ambitious timeline from the beginning for an full approval, for conditional approval, not for an emergency use. And what we did then was that was a plan, an ambitious one, that would be possibly changed in both directions. And as a matter of fact, during the assessment, both things happened. We ran into issues where some parts took longer than expected. We needed 1-2 additional rounds with the company, get some more data, needed a reanalysis that took more time. And at other parts, it was possible to move faster. And there we changed the target, the timelines to the very best the assessors, the teams could do. And that is why we ended up earlier. I don't need to repeat what Emer Cook just said about the difference between an emergency use and a marketing authorization. Those are different things. And finally, some important thing, the issue time pressure, political influence, however you would like to call that. Well, one of the good things about our European system is this big network, and that the decision is in the end made in the committee with representatives from each and every member state. So the option to pressurize here from one or the other corner is extremely limited, up to non-existence. Even more so because in this very case, with this procedure, you can be sure that each and every member state was highly interested and would find the resources to contribute to the assessment, meaning the focus was exclusively on the science. There were too many involved, all the member states, who would look in the science as to allow any political whitewashing or adaptation. Yeah? No, very clearly, let me reassure you, that was a scientific assessment, full stop. Over, thank you.
Many thanks, Harald. The next question is from Naomi Kresge from Bloomberg News. Naomi, please.
Hi, this is Naomi from Bloomberg. Thanks for taking my question. Two questions, if I may. I was wondering if you could explain in a little bit more detail why you think this vaccine will work against the new UK variant of the virus. And then secondly, just a question about the use of the vaccine in older teenagers. Wondering what the databasis is for using this in kids between the ages of 16 to 18. And if you could tell us anything about time frame for review in children under the age of 16, that would be great. Thank you.
Many thanks, Naomi. The first question I will give to Marco Cavalieri, the chair of our pandemic task force. And the second one is going to be responded to by Harald Ensmann. Marco, please go ahead.
I have to start by saying that we don't have yet evidence with respect to the new strain, whether it is susceptible to the antibodies generated by the vaccine. However, we have quite a broad knowledge around the fact that these vaccines is capable of generating neutralizing antibodies that can neutralize different variants with mutation within the receptor binding domain, which is the key area for attachment to the cells in the human body. So we think that even if we don't have yet full confirmation, it is very likely that the vaccine will retain protection also against this new variant.
Okay, many thanks, Marco. So the second part of the question would be for Harald. Harald, please take the floor.
The teenagers, yes, indeed. The company, the applicant, Pfizer-BioNTech, came in and asked for an indication, for an authorization from 16 onwards. And indeed, there were a significant number of 16 and 17-year-olds included. But more importantly, 16 and 17-year-olds are sufficiently close to 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds. So what we could do is taking together all the knowledge of the 10,000s of patients treated in all age groups and realizing that 16 and 17-year-olds are not that far away from that, and having this confirmed by the limited number of data in this group, this together would allow us to be sufficiently confident that the benefit risk for this age group is positive as well. This is, for example, quite different for the pregnant women. You will realize that the difference between a pregnant woman and a non-pregnant woman is certainly greater than between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old. And in addition, the numbers, the people we had in the groups of the adolescents, 16, 17-year-old, was approximately 10 times higher than the figures we had for the pregnant women. Yeah, therefore, I'm quite confident that this is a solid scientific justification for this age group. Thank you.
Many thanks, Harald. The next question is from Frank Jordans from Associated Press. Please, Frank.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. You've already answered most of my questions, but I have one more concerning the age groups over 16. So you talked about the caveat concerning pregnant women. Are there any other adults where you might have caveats concerning the immunization with this vaccine?
Many thanks, Frank. Harald, can you please respond to that question?
Sure. Details, please have a look in the data that will be public very soon. The product information to SMPC. The good thing is that we did look not only in the usually older patients, meaning 60, 65, we really had a lot of patients older than 75 and therefore have data to confirm it works, and it does not seem to be a problem in this group as well. The same goes for the very important group of people who we must expect, if they get an infection, are more likely to get a more severe clinical course. People with emphysema, with asthma, with hypertension, extremely adipositas, all those risks we know about. And it is quite important that the study, the big trial, gave us reassuring data on these patients as well. You probably know there have been by now very few numbers of anaphylactic reactions. So here, someone with known history of severe anaphylactic reactions, that would be one of the populations I would be a little more careful about. But safety is another committee. So I guess I hand this one over, if the moderator allows me, to Sabine Strauss from the Prague.
Sabine, yes, please take the floor if you want to complement.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I think one of the advantages that we had is that other countries already started their vaccination campaign, and therefore we have more data available. From the clinical trials, there was no safety signal on the occurrence of anaphylaxis. There was one in the placebo group and one in the actively vaccinated group. So that shows again how important it is to further evaluate and to monitor in the real life setting. At the moment, we have a very limited number of cases compared to the number of vaccinated patients. I think that the CDC just released information that they have vaccinated, as of Saturday, 270,000 people, and they have identified 6 cases, possible cases of allergic reactions, most of them being mild. So I think we will follow up this very, very closely in our spontaneous reports, in our active monitoring, and also in the studies that will be performed by the marketing authorization holder after the marketing authorization has been approved. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sabine. Our next question comes from Irene Zakadula from ERT, the Hellenic Broadcasting Corporation. Irene, please.
Thank you for taking my questions. First of all, I would like to ask, do we know how many vaccines are available at the moment for the member states of EU? And secondly, when can we expect a second batch of vaccines? Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Emma Cook is going to respond to this. Emma, please.
So, thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Yeah, so the information on the number of vaccines available is each of the member states has that information, and we don't have the overall information. What I can tell you is about the Moderna vaccine. This is also under evaluation, and we have tentatively set a date of the 6th of January as a possible date for the opinion on that vaccine. At the same time, we have we're looking at more than 47 vaccines that are in development at the moment.
Many thanks. So the next question comes from Lorenza Consoli from ASCA News. Lorenzo. Perhaps while we sort this out, we take the next journalist and then we come back to you, Lorenzo. So the next one would be Naomi O'Leary from the Irish Times. Naomi.
Hello, thank you very much for taking my question. My question is about the timeline in terms of clarifying some of those unanswered questions at the moment in terms of safety for pregnant women, and also the question about whether it stops transmission. When would you expect us to have more clarity on those issues? Thank you.
Many thanks, Naomi. Sabine Strauss is going to respond to your question. Sabine, please.
Thank you very much for your question. I will address the issue around pregnancy. It's, of course, very important that we collect more information there. We expect the number of exposed pregnant women to be quite low in the beginning. But we will, of course, monitor them very, very carefully through our monitoring systems. And we will collect data on pregnant women in 4 of the post-authorization studies that will have to be performed. It is, of course, very dependent on how many women that are pregnant are being vaccinated in order to come up with timelines. So it's very difficult to say anything concrete now, but it has our fullest attention, and it is something that we would like to resolve and have better information on as soon as possible. So that's for the pregnancy part. And then I would like to hand over to Maria-Agnes.
Thank you very much, Sabine. So we try again with Lorenzo Consoli. Lorenzo? We still don't hear you.
And on the question on transmission?
Well, okay, Marco, yes, please. Can you talk about the transmission?
Yeah, so there will be data collected from the ongoing randomized clinical trial to better understand what is the ability of the vaccine potentially for preventing infection. But in terms of transmission, for that we need specific ad hoc study and most likely large epidemiological studies that can run once there is a large amount of the population that has received the vaccine. So recognizing it is an important question, it looks like it will take a bit longer before we will have a clear-cut view of what is the potential of the vaccine to reduce infection and transmission. Thank you.
Many thanks, Marco. So we have another question from Politico. Gillian, please. Gillian, do you hear us?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I just took a second to unmute myself. I just wanted to ask for a point of clarification. I heard that there were some parts that, some pieces of information that took longer than expected and required some additional information from the drug makers. I was curious if you could elaborate a bit more on what those pieces of information were.
Many thanks, Gillian. Harald, can you please take that question?
But it was quite a mixed bag of different things. That could be that were very simple ones. With regard to adverse effects, whether different words described the same or a different medical condition, that would change indeed the classification, that would change from a rare to a very rare adverse effect or vice versa. Nothing dramatic, but something to go back to, try to find out in the original data, what exactly was it, what was expressed there. That was a simple one. On the other hand, of course, we had the pharmaceutical quality issue here, and you do realize this is the first ever RNA vaccine we approved. Yeah, so there is less experience in the system. There is a lot of new territory for our assessors and for those who manufacture this. And therefore, it is unavoidable, I guess, that this requires a few more clarification questions, if you like. A learning experience on both sides even, than if that would be another Sartan or another penicillin or something like that. Yeah? So both there's a range of the additional investigations, additional questions, additional requirement for information we had to get from the company. Broad range, both ends, from the really scientific one to tiny but important things that need clarification. Over.
Many thanks, Harald. And before we close, we make a last attempt to get Lorenzo Consoli on the line. Lorenzo?
It is another question concerning the mutation, the variant, the British variant of the virus. I think it's for Marco Cavalieri. What kind of mutation would be worrying for you for this kind of vaccine? What is the kind of mutation that you really don't want to see because apparently we don't have enough information about this mutation. And so what are you afraid of in this mutation, if ever would come this, let's hope, no. Thank you.
That's a difficult one, and Marco Cavalieri is going to take it. Marco, please.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I think in principle, what would scare us if we see, multiple mutations, particularly on the spike protein and on the receptor binding domain, that would really alter the antigenic profile of the virus with respect to these vaccines, and indeed render them incapable of neutralizing the virus. But of course, it's really early to say. We need to gain more experience. But I think we will need indeed to see this virus changing quite substantially before we can really be in a situation to see that trouble is coming up, and we may have to think whether the vaccine has to be somehow rebuilt, incorporating new emerging strains. So for the time being, we are not too worried. Thank you.
Many thanks, Marco, and many thanks to all our speakers, and many thanks to you, journalists, for attending this press briefing. If you have any further questions, as always, contact our press office at press@ema.europa.eu. And I want to thank all of you and have a good day. Goodbye.